Have you ever felt that emptiness that seems to consume everything around you, when someone you considered essential to your happiness is simply no longer present in the same way? Perhaps it was a relationship that ended, a friend who grew distant, or even someone you idealized from afar who never lived up to your expectations. There's a particular pain in discovering that our entire sense of purpose, our entire search for meaning, was placed in the hands of another human being. And when that person can no longer carry the weight of being our source of meaning, when they inevitably reveal their imperfect and limited humanity, we feel as if the ground has disappeared beneath our feet. Albert Camus, the philosopher of the absurd, invites us to deeply examine this fundamental error we make in outsourcing our reason for existing. Because perhaps true freedom begins precisely when we stop looking in others for what can only be found within ourselves. The human condition places us before a cruel and inescapable paradox. We are born alone, we die alone, and throughout our entire existence we carry an existential solitude that no company can completely eliminate. Yet we spend our entire lives trying to fill this void through other people, as if it were possible to transfer the responsibility of our own existence to someone who is fighting exactly the same internal battles we are. Camus understood that this search for meaning through others is not just a strategic error, but an escape from the most fundamental reality of human existence, that we are irremediably free and responsible for creating our own meaning. When we place our happiness, our purpose, and our reason for living in another person, we are actually trying to escape from the anxiety that comes with the radical freedom of choosing who we want to be at each moment. Observe how this manifests in daily life. There are people who cannot make simple decisions without the approval of someone they consider important. There are those who wake up every day waiting for a message, a call, a gesture that confirms their worth and their reason to exist. There are those who build their entire identity around being useful, necessary, indispensable to someone specific. And when that dynamic changes, when the other person grows, evolves, or simply chooses a different path, the entire structure of meaning crumbles. This is not simply a matter of emotional dependence or low self-esteem, although these elements may be present. It's something much deeper and more universal. The desperate attempt to escape confrontation with our own freedom and existential responsibility. Camus teaches us that the universe is fundamentally silent about the meaning of life. There is no divine voice whispering directions. There is no cosmic instruction manual. There are no guarantees that our choices and actions have meaning beyond what we ourselves create. This realization can be terrifying, and it's natural that we seek refuge in the illusion that another person can offer us the answers that the cosmos refuses to give. When we fall in love, when we find someone who seems to understand our soul, when we establish deep connections, it's tempting to think we've finally found our existential anchor. But Camus warns us that this is a subtle trap. By making another person our source of meaning, we not only place upon them an impossible burden to carry, but we also deprive ourselves of the authentic experience of discovering our own capacity to create meaning. The person in whom we deposit our existential expectations is facing exactly the same dilemmas we are. They also wake up sometimes not knowing why they exist. They also question the purpose of their actions. They also struggle against the feeling that life can be absurd and without clear direction. How can someone who is navigating their own turbulent waters simultaneously be the lighthouse that guides us? It's an expectation that is not only unfair, but completely unrealistic. And when that person inevitably fails to be our existential salvation, when they reveal their imperfect humanity, their own search for meaning, their own vulnerability, we feel not just disappointment, but a kind of betrayal that is actually directed against our own naivety. Think about the times you felt completely lost, when someone important in your life made a decision that didn't include you, or when you discovered that this person had doubts, fears, and insecurities you had never considered. The anger, sadness, and despair we feel in these moments are not just about losing the person, but about losing the illusion that someone could carry the weight of giving meaning to our existence. It's the moment when we are forced to confront our own existential responsibility, and this can be overwhelming for those who have spent so much time trying to avoid this confrontation. Camus proposes something radical, that we fully embrace this responsibility, that we stop looking in others for what can only come from within us, This doesn't mean living in isolation or rejecting deep and meaningful relationships. On the contrary, it means learning to relate to others from a place of personal wholeness, where our happiness and our sense of purpose don't depend on their actions, choices, or constant presence in our lives. When we manage to create our own meaning, when we assume total responsibility for our existence, our relationships become encounters between two complete people, not desperate attempts to fill existential voids. Camus' philosophy of the absurd invites us to recognize that life has no intrinsic meaning, but that this is not a tragedy, it's a liberation. If there is no predetermined purpose, if there is no cosmic script we must follow, then we are completely free to write our own story. This freedom includes the choice of how we relate to the people we love. We can choose to love them not because we need them to complete us, but because we choose to celebrate their unique existence and share our own fullness with them. This is a much more mature and sustainable form of love than the existential dependence we often confuse with true love. When we stop seeking meaning in another person, something interesting happens. We discover that we have internal resources we didn't even know existed. We discover that we are capable of finding beauty, purpose, and joy in places we had never even considered before. We discover that our capacity to create meaning is much greater than we imagined. And paradoxically, when we stop pressuring others to be our source of meaning, our relationships become richer, more authentic, more free. People no longer feel burdened by the impossible responsibility of giving meaning to our life, and can simply be who they are, with all their imperfections and their own journey of discovery. This doesn't happen overnight. Unlearning patterns of existential dependence is a long and sometimes painful process. There are moments when the temptation to return to old habits is almost irresistible, especially when we face difficult or uncertain periods. There are moments when existential solitude seems unbearable, and the idea of finding someone who can carry that weight for us becomes seductive again. But Camus reminds us that these moments of difficulty are exactly when we most need to exercise our existential autonomy. It's easy to be independent when everything is going well, but it's in moments of crisis that we discover whether we've truly learned to create our own meaning. The Camusian revolt is not just against social or political injustices, but against our own tendency to flee from existential responsibility. It's a revolt against the temptation to outsource our reason for living. It's a courageous affirmation that we are capable of facing the absence of cosmic meaning and still choosing to live fully and passionately. When we apply this revolt to our relationships, we stop seeing other people as possible saviors and begin to see them as journey companions, each carrying their own existential burden, each creating their own meaning. Now think about your own experience. How many times have you felt that your life lost meaning because someone important moved away or changed? How many times have you placed your entire happiness in another person's hands? If this resonates with you, know that you are not alone in this discovery. Thousands of people go through the same realization every day. Leave a comment saying, "I feel this too," if you've lived this experience of seeking in others what can only come from within. Your response not only validates your own journey, but also helps other people feel less alone in this process of self-discovery. Sharing these reflections creates a network of mutual support, where each person can feel seen and understood in their existential struggle. The human solidarity that Camus defends is not based on mutual dependence, but on mutual recognition. When we recognize that we are all facing the same fundamental existential dilemmas, when we see that each person is struggling to create meaning in a universe that offers no easy answers, we develop a form of compassion that doesn't require the other to be our salvation. We can offer support, understanding, companionship, without expecting the other to solve our existential problems. We can receive support, understanding, companionship, without transferring to the other the responsibility for our happiness and our purpose. This shift in perspective completely transforms the quality of our relationships. Instead of interactions based on desperate need, we have encounters based on conscious choice. Instead of possessive and anxious love, we have generous and free love. Instead of constant fear of abandonment, we have the tranquility of knowing that our wholeness doesn't depend on the other's constant presence. This doesn't mean we don't feel longing, that we don't deeply value the people we love, or that we don't suffer when important relationships come to an end. It means that these feelings don't threaten our fundamental capacity to continue creating meaning and finding purpose in our existence. The process of assuming complete responsibility for our own sense of life is simultaneously liberating and frightening. Liberating because it frees us from the emotional and existential dependence that often makes our relationships tense and unsustainable. Frightening because it confronts us with the vastness of our freedom and the responsibility that comes with it. But Camus assures us that this confrontation is not something to be avoided, it's something to be celebrated. It's the discovery of our infinite capacity to create, to choose, to give meaning to our experiences, regardless of external circumstances or other people's actions. When we internalize this understanding, we begin to notice subtle but profound changes in how we relate to the world. We stop interpreting every action of others as a reflection of our personal worth. We stop constantly seeking external validation for our choices and decisions. We stop feeling that our life is on hold waiting for someone to choose us, love us, complete us. We begin to understand that we are already complete, we are already valuable, we already have everything we need to create a meaningful existence. If you're following this reflection and feel it's touching something important in your personal journey, consider subscribing to the channel. Not because you need more content to complete yourself, but because you've chosen to be part of a community that values self-knowledge and personal growth. Here we explore these deep existential questions, not to find definitive answers, but to develop our capacity to ask better questions and to live with more consciousness and authenticity. Each subscription represents a person who decided to take an active role in their own journey of discovery, and that's something that deserves to be celebrated and mutually supported. The passion for life that Camus defends is not a passion dependent on others' approval or presence, but a passion born from the very decision to live fully despite the absence of cosmic guarantees. It's the passion of someone who discovered they can create beauty even amid chaos, who can find joy even without having all the answers, who can love deeply without losing their existential autonomy. This passion becomes contagious when we live it authentically, inspiring others not through our dependence but through our freedom. There's a fundamental difference between needing someone and choosing to be with someone. When we need someone to give meaning to our life, we are in a state of lack that colors the entire relationship with anxiety and possessiveness. When we choose to be with someone from our own fullness, we are offering a genuine gift, our free and conscious presence. The other person can accept this gift or not, can reciprocate or not, can remain in our lives or not. And while these variations certainly affect our experience, they don't threaten our fundamental capacity to continue creating meaning and living with purpose. Death, a central theme in Camus' philosophy, gains a new perspective when we stop seeking meaning in others. The awareness of our mortality, instead of leading us to despair or desperate search for someone who makes us feel eternal, reminds us of the preciousness and urgency of each moment. If our existence is finite, if we have no guarantee of unlimited time, then each day we spend waiting for someone to complete us is a lost day of our capacity to create our own completeness. Death frees us from the illusion that we have infinite time to avoid our existential responsibility. Camus found beauty and meaning, even while recognizing the absurd nature of existence. He shows us that it's possible to live with intensity and passion without needing external justification or constant validation from others. His own life was an example of how someone can create art, build meaningful relationships, fight for important causes, all from a fundamental acceptance that the universe owes us no explanations or guarantees. When we apply this philosophy to our personal relationships, we discover a way of loving that is simultaneously freer and deeper. Albert Camus leaves us a lesson that resonates through the decades. The error of seeking meaning in another person is not just a strategic error that leads to disappointment and suffering, but a betrayal of our own extraordinary capacity to create meaning. We are beings endowed with a radical freedom that allows us to choose how to interpret our experience, how to respond to circumstances, how to create beauty and purpose even in the face of uncertainty and impermanence. When we outsource this capacity, when we expect others to carry the weight of giving meaning to our existence, we are wasting the most precious gift we received, our existential autonomy. The true personal revolution begins when we stop looking for our salvation in others and begin to discover our own infinite capacity to create, to choose, to love from fullness and not from lack. In this recognition, we find not only our freedom, but also the foundation for genuinely free and authentic relationships, where two complete people choose to share their journeys without abdicating their own existential responsibilities. The universe may be silent about the meaning of life, but we don't need to be silent about our choice to live with passion, purpose, and autonomy.